Before we get into today's story, I want to note that it involves a historical disaster with significant loss of life, including people of all ages. If that's not where your head is today, we'll be back tomorrow with another story. Hey everybody, it's Ron, and I want to tell you a story about business and how that story changed everything. Picture this. It's a Friday night at the county fair, maybe late summer. The smell of fried food and cut grass in the air, the sound of a midway that's just loud enough to be exciting. Two people on one of their early dates, still figuring each other out, still trying to make the right impression. He wants to ride the Ferris wheel. She's not so sure. She looks up at it, turning slowly against the darkening sky. The lights, the height, the little car swinging just enough to make you grip the bar a little tighter. And she says, "Is this thing actually safe?" He says, "Of course it's safe. They inspect these things. They have to before the carnival even opens." And he's right. In most states across the U.S., traveling amusements go through inspection before the first ticket is sold in a new town. The same goes for food vendors, temporary structures, electrical hookups. The whole operation gets looked at before it opens for business. It's not a perfect system, and the rules vary significantly from state to state. But the framework exists. Someone is supposed to check. But it wasn't always that way. To understand one of the biggest reasons why that changed, and why it matters every time you hand a ticket to a carnival worker and climb into a ride you've never seen before, we need to go back to Hartford, Connecticut, on a hot afternoon in the summer of July 1944. From Business Basics, I'm Ron Trucks, and this is Business History, the daily podcast where we explain the stories that changed business forever. Every date on the calendar has a story where business reshaped the world. Today, July 6th, that story takes us to 1944, when the tent came down. In the summer of 1944, the circus coming to town was not a quaint expression. It was an event. There was no television, home radio was the dominant entertainment medium, and motion pictures required a trip to a theater that not everyone could make easily. When the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus, billed not modestly as the greatest show on earth, rolled into a city on its train, it was often the largest live spectacle most people in that town would see all year. 7,000 people showing up on a weekday afternoon in Hartford wasn't unusual, it was the point. The circus that arrived in Hartford, Connecticut on July 5th, 1944 was already operating under strain. World War II had pulled workers and materials away from civilian operations across the country, and Ringling Brothers was no exception. Delays had become common. The previous day, one of the two scheduled shows had to be canceled because the trains arrived too late to set up in time. In circus culture, missing a show carries a very specific superstition. It's considered a bad omen, and some employees arrived at the July 6th matinee already uneasy. The Big Top itself was an engineering feat. The main tent could seat 9,000 people around 3 rings, making it the largest circus tent in the country. Like virtually every large canvas tent of the area, it had been waterproofed the previous spring with a mixture of 1,800 pounds of paraffin wax dissolved in 6,000 gallons of gasoline. It was a standard practice. Nobody questioned it. The tent had been treated the same way before every season in city after city for years. What Hartford's city government had done was equally standard and equally unexamined. The building department issued a permit before the bleachers were even assembled, with no review of exit widths or tent flameproofing. Actually, the Fire Prevention Bureau was never officially notified the circus was even in town. Ringling Brothers had performed in Hartford before, lots of times. The setup was always the same. No one thought to look harder. One last layer to add to all of this is that 2 years earlier, in August of 1942, a fire had broken out in the Ringling Brothers Menagerie in Cleveland, Ohio. That's the section of the circus where animals were housed and displayed. That fire killed a number of animals. No people died, but no meaningful changes were made to circus fire safety in the aftermath either. The warning existed. It just didn't cost enough for anyone to act on it. Thursday, July 6, 1944, was by every account a miserably hot afternoon in Hartford. The 2:15 matinee at Barber Street was packed. Roughly 7,000 people were inside the Big Top when the Flying Wallendas took to the high wire. The band was playing, and the afternoon was unfolding exactly the way an afternoon at the circus was supposed to unfold. At approximately 2:40, about 25 minutes later, a small flame appeared near the southwest sidewall of the tent. Most likely, investigators later concluded, from a carelessly discarded cigarette near the men's toilet area just outside the canvas. The cause was never officially proven. Years later, a teenage roustabout named Robert Segi confessed to starting the fire deliberately, and then he recanted. Forensic re-examination in the 1980s raised doubts about the cigarette theory without resolving them. What nobody disputes is what happened next. One of the performers spotted it and called out. And that's when Merle Evans, the circus band leader, made a decision that every circus person inside that tent had been trained to understand. Evans pivoted his musicians immediately to start playing Stars and Stripes Forever, John Philip Sousa's march, familiar and celebratory to the audience, but carrying an entirely different meaning to anyone who worked for the circus. Stars and Stripes Forever was the emergency signal. Every circus employee, from the performers to the riggers to the concession workers to the animal handlers, knew exactly what it meant when that song started playing out of sequence. Something had gone wrong. Drop everything and move. But the tent was already going. The paraffin wax and gasoline mixture, designed to make the tent waterproof, didn't smolder. The canvas went up in a way that canvas soaked in accelerant goes up. Within 8 minutes, the entire 520-foot tent was fully engulfed. Flames reached 100 feet. Burning pieces of canvas rained down on the crowd, still trying to find a way out. The exits, already narrow for a structure that size, were partially blocked by animal cages being moved in and out of the tent as part of the show's normal flow. Bottlenecks formed. People were trapped. Some cut their own exits through the canvas sidewalls rather than fight towards the official ones. The circus had dozens of fire extinguishers on site. None of them had been distributed through the tent before the show. Many of them were empty or hadn't been recharged in some time. The Hartford Fire Department, officially unaware the circus was even operating in the city, was not on site. By the time the units arrived, the tent was gone. 167 people died. More than 700 were injured. The tent had been fully engulfed in under 10 minutes. In the investigation that followed, Hartford's own building commissioner acknowledged that the permit his department had issued covered none of the safety conditions that mattered. Several Ringling Brothers executives were convicted of involuntary manslaughter. The circus eventually reached a $5 million settlement with victims' families, a figure that took a decade to resolve. Hartford was not the first American disaster to expose what happens when public safety rules fail to account for temporary operations. The Iroquois Theater fire in Chicago on December 30th, 1903, a story we covered in our December 30th episode, killed more than 600 people in a building that had been open less than 5 weeks, with exits that didn't work and safety systems that had never been tested. The Cocoanut Grove nightclub fire in Boston in November of 1942 killed 492 people in a venue where exits were locked, hidden, or too narrow to handle a crowd moving fast. Each of those disasters closed a specific gap. Each one rewrote a piece of the code. Hartford, unfortunately, closed a different gap. The one that governed operations that didn't stay long enough for anyone to take a hard look. The U.S. Fire Administration lists the Hartford Circus fire alongside the Iroquois Theater and the Cocoanut Grove fire as one of the historical disasters that directly changed American fire code. The specific mandate that followed was flame retardant treatments for tents, but the broader consequence was a rethinking of how governments regulate transient operations. Anything that sets up under a temporary structure, serves the public, and moves on before the paperwork catches up. That framework is what your county fair operates inside today. The food trucks, the carnival rides, the temporary electrical hookups, the tent structures over vendor rows. In most states across the U.S., all of it goes through an inspection process before the first ticket is sold. The rules may vary by jurisdiction, and the system is far from perfect, but the principle that someone in an official capacity is supposed to check before the public walks in, that principle owes a direct debt to what happened on Barber Street in Hartford, Connecticut on July 6, 1944. Ringling Brothers performed under the big top for the last time on July 16, 1956 in Pittsburgh. The official reason was cost control. The tent model had become too expensive to sustain. But the liability environment that Hartford created, the regulatory requirements that followed, and the post-war rise of television, which began pulling audiences away from live spectacle just as the circus was trying to recover, all pushed in the same direction. The greatest show on earth moved indoors, into arenas and stadiums, where someone else owned the structure and the fire exits were already built into the walls. The business lesson Hartford teaches isn't complicated, but it's easy to miss when things are going well. When the cost of a risk is diffuse, spread across thousands of customers who each assume someone else has already checked, the operator has very little market incentive to manage it carefully. The circus had come to Hartford before. The setup was always the same. Nothing bad had ever happened. That's not a safety record. That's an unexamined assumption. And on July 6, 1944, 7,000 people walked directly into that assumption. I'm Ron Trucks, and this is Business History, the podcast that finds the turning points behind the headlines. To hear more stories like this, follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen. And if you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to subscribe and leave a quick review. It helps more people find the story behind the business. And if you want to actually understand business better without the fluff or the buzzwords or the MBA language, start by visiting us at businessdailypodcast.com.